So it is Friday night. Feels like it's been forever. And like many Friday nights, it is steak night. After a long, hard week at work, in the office, I just enjoy opening up a nice bottle of wine, a nice steak, and I was going to say a nice thick steak, and actually this one is really a 2-inch porterhouse with a pretty solid, so porterhouse being the strip and the fillet, where when you get a T-bone, it's mostly just a strip on the bone, and the fillet is so tiny that they just call it a T-bone. So when there's enough meat, they'll call it a porterhouse. This one has enough meat, but it's a very difficult thing to cook evenly. The sirloin cooks much slower than the fillet. See how I did. That's why, even though I love porterhouses, challenging to cook for sure. But so I didn't know what to have. There's numerous wines I want to get into. I want to do a sherry tasting. I have a Madeira, a dry Madeira, a style I've never had. I bought these sherries and I kind of swore off sherries. But this new store that deals with small producers put out this email with these 3 sherries. They sound cool. I'm going to give it one more shot. Famous last words. But that same store sells this wine, and I haven't had this wine in a long time. Mas de Gaussac, and this is 2022, so it's super young. And what's so special about this? It's the purveyor of this wine is very much a character. So this is a cab heavy wine out of the Languedoc. Languedoc doesn't do a lot of Cabernet. This purveyor does, and this is 76 cab, 5% Tannat, a very tannic grape, and that is used primarily in the wines called Maturin. Merlot 4%, Pinot Noir 4%, Petit Verdot 4%, Syrah 4%, Cab Franc 3%. So really it's a very heavy, in the United States this would just be labeled Cab Sauv because it's over 75%, unless it said it's state, that'd have to be a little higher. But it's the Guibert family, and he's very much a character. And he hates Scores and Robert Parker. And I know this because I watched this documentary called Montevino, and I don't really recommend it unless you're super into wine. But if you are super into wine, it's absolutely a pretty good documentary. And it really does talk a bit about the scoring and Robert Parker specifically when he hit the scene, and how his palate started dominating the way wine was made because of scoring. The 100-point scale, very much understood in the United States because of the education system here, where Jancis Robinson, obviously probably the top female wine critic in the world, uses a 20-point scale. A lot of Europeans use a 20-point scale. She is obviously European, so she's British. Regardless, it doesn't really matter. These are scores. We talked about scores. I don't really care about scores. I do score wines, but I score them on my little 5-point scale in an app, and I'm very liberal with giving 5s on a wine that just are super enjoyable in the moment. That's it. And not get too carried away. So I haven't had this one in a while. Oh, he's called the Bordeaux of the Languedoc. So the other interesting thing about it, the last time I had this one, it was phenomenal. Absolutely reminded me of Bordeaux. So I really don't expect anything different. This is 2022 about the 2023. His wine prices have gone up. I think this is like $70 now. So that is substantial. And you're going to buy this gentleman's wine, this purveyor's wine, the Guibert family, you got to pay a little bit now. It has been decanting, and I do recommend wines that are young like this, that are really meant to sit about 5 years. I'm sure they could sit longer, but 5's like a sweet spot for Bordeaux for me. 5 to 10. A Bordeaux of quality. A lower end Bordeaux could probably be drank much earlier. And I only said because sometimes the tannins are a little bit astringent and harsh. That sort of softens and mellows. The decanting will allow some of that to happen as well. Plus just opens up the wine to the oxygen, because a lot of these wines are trying to reduce the amount of oxygen ever touching it so that the wine stays fresh and ages correctly. So not an insane aroma, but it absolutely reminds me of Bordeaux. Absolutely. There's cedar for sure. I'm getting a little bit of leather. A little bit of a mint. It's not quite eucalyptus. A little muted. a little muted on the nose. I did have a gin martini, which is really just called a martini. The original martini was made with gin. So it was with an aged gin, not commonly found, this thing called Kensington XO. I am totally going on tangents today, but phenomenal. And I did it with a vermouth, Dolan vermouth, but it was I forget which one it's called, and it's not as super dry. It's kind of like a semi-dry vermouth. And I put a little extra in it. It changes the profile of the martini big time, much less dry. The gin obviously added botanicals, but this age part and this spice to it for sure because of the oak age. The gin literally looks copper. You can't see it. But I had that first, so I wonder if that's kind of disturbing my senses. Only reason I brought it up. And it's opening up a little bit more. Doing the old trick where you cap it, trap some of the aromas. Yeah, there's... So I'm getting a little bit more blackberry now, some raspberry. It smells great. When you can get 5 or 6 aromas out of a wine, semi-distinguishable. You're not going to get orange out of this or lemon out of a red wine. Yeah, you might get orange. Okay, you might get an orange. You're not going to get lemon or lime out of a red wine, right? So sometimes people are like, oh, this is so stupid. What are you really talking about? Is there a right or wrong answer? In most cases, there isn't. It's really to each person, but you're not going to get lemon or lime out of this. That something's not right. If you tell me this wine smells like kiwi, I need you examined. That's tannic and acidic. A little lighter than what you expect from a left bank Bordeaux. This would mimic a left bank Bordeaux, which is Cabernet heavy. Right bank being Merlot Cab Franc heavy. Good finish, some spice. There's baking spice on the finish. There's still that raspberries there. I don't love raspberries. I don't dislike raspberries. There's certain things I dislike, but if I have a preference of fruit, I never really reach for a raspberry. I would reach for a cherry or a blueberry or a mango or pineapple way before I ever would reach for a raspberry. So when I get raspberry to wine, I'm not super thrilled, but I don't dislike it, if that makes any sense. Yeah, it's got tannin. It's an interesting wine. Expect a little more. I have to be honest. I expected a little bit more. A little lighter. It feels like a lighter styled Cabernet. Languedoc's hot. The south of France. I just assumed this would be... Now, I don't know anything about the 2022 vintage of Languedoc. I've started to lose a little bit of my knowing of some of the vintages. I probably need to study some charts. I do believe that vintages matter a bit. California is almost vintage agnostic at this point just because the weather's nearly perfect. They have had 2 vintages that were off. One was because of a fire and one was ages ago, and the rest are almost it's almost like the immaculate growing conditions in California, hence the reason that 1 acre is so expensive. Much more difficult in France, more variable weather, so vintage variation does matter a little bit more there. You should be careful. Good producers aren't going to produce a crap wine even in a vintage that was challenging, but you can't say it's going to be as good as some others. Yeah. I wanted this to be a lot better. It's pretty good. It's not great. It's not great for the money. It finishes a little short, and the tannins there up front then dissipates. Finishes short. It's got a spicy kind of in the back of the throat thing, which I don't love. Raspberries there, which is not my favorite fruit, which I mentioned. A little bit of that cedar and leather, but not as much now. more on the nose, much less on the palate. It's not aged enough probably for that. Bordeaux does develop that in its later years. I would say the 2022 on this, I would not buy another one. I do have the 23. I'll hope for something better. Astringent, a little astringent and drying. It's not as juicy. It feels a little hot too. I'm very disappointed. It's not a bad wine. Don't get me wrong. 13.5%. It certainly tastes different than that. Gosh. They call it the first growth of the Languedoc. So first growth Bordeaux, which is left bank. It says we recommend decanting for optimum enjoyment. Well, I am decanting it, and I have a bit. I wonder if this is just too early. There's this saying in wine, and I don't really get it. There's a dumb phase. They call it a dumb phase or a closed down phase. I forget. I don't know that I have enough knowledge to know when a wine is in that. I don't have enough wines in the same vintage to taste one a year and say, okay, this year it was great but a little young. This year it was really closed down in this weird dumb phase, and then this year, oh, it really. I don't have enough wine to do some type of tasting that way. And if somebody told me that this was what this wine was feeling like right now, I could say, oh, okay, maybe. But it does sound like a kind of a crazy wine thing. But such a young wine, hot region like Languedoc, I kind of expected it to be bigger, but it's 13.5%. So this is meant to be more restrained. So maybe this really tastes like more like old Bordeaux, not new Bordeaux. Maybe that's what it's going for. And maybe if I take it in that perspective, changing my perspective, it does definitely feel like old Bordeaux. But I don't know how much this can age. The acid is there to maybe make this age. Maybe that's what this wine is. Maybe the 22 vintage out of Languedoc needs some more age because the acid will carry this through, and then it'll become this lighter styled Bordeaux that they're used to. The word of Bordeaux used to call claret. Maybe it becomes one of these old school claret Bordeaux from way back when, the 70s and 80s, early 80s, before 82, which was a breakout vintage when Robert Parker kind of got onto the scene and rated the 82 vintage some crazy score. Okay, I think that's it. I was going to talk more, but it's already been 13 minutes. I want to get into the red wine grapes that are my favorite, but I think I decided I'm not going to do it that way. I'm just going to talk about some red wine grapes in a video that I just enjoy and why I enjoy them and what I enjoyed them with. And then if someone does ask me what my favorite wine is, grape or wine, I'm going to have an answer. I'm going to have an answer, and I do have an answer. But it's probably not my favorite wine because my tastes and the food that's in front of me, the time of year, if I'm outdoors, indoors, where I'm at. If I'm at a beach, I don't want this red wine. If I'm at a beach, I want a white of some sort. And I do drink probably more white than red now. And gosh, I never thought I'd say that, but I do. I drink more white wine than red in a year. All right, that's it. I do think this wine, I feel like I'm giving it a bad deal, but I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5 right now, for whatever that means. Doesn't mean crap, but I wouldn't spend $70 on this. I could give you 20 other wines for $70 and would be better than this today, and I think more enjoyable for the palate of most people that I know, even myself, because I could find 10, 20 wines that are, to me, more enjoyable than this is right this moment. Will this wine get better over the night? I don't know. Will this wine get better over time? It's the only one I got, and I definitely don't think I'm going to buy another 22, but I do have the 23, so that's going to be it. Have a good night.